Hey y'all, Brandy here. So, yet again, it's Friday night, and you all know what that means. So, tonight, in our terrifyingly true tale, I wanted to do something a little bit different. This is definitely one of the best ones, in my opinion, to be able to showcase a lot of different aspects of the paranormal at one time in one place. It involves so many different things. I'm going to be able to give you guys a haunting as far as entities. We have shadow people. We have cryptids like Bigfoot and other really odd unknown creatures that make an appearance. We have a predator type of being, as well as some cigarette smoking dogs. So sit back and relax, and I'm going to take you into what I like to call my version of the Upside Down for all of you Stranger Things fans. And we are going to go on a road trip to Skinwalker Ranch. This is going to be part one. Cheers. Alright, you guys. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of the backstory first. Skinwalker Ranch is a 512-acre ranch that is located in Uinta, Utah. The closest city is Ballard, Utah. In 1934, it was purchased by Kenneth and Edith Myers. They kept it for a little while, and then they sold it, or the family sold it, in 1994 to the Sherman family, Terry and Gwen Sherman. They were there from 94 to 96, to 1996. And in 1996, the Sherman family sold it, 512 acres in Utah of prime, beautiful ranch land. I'll try to insert a picture up here for you guys, to the famous entrepreneur Robert Bigelow. Yes, he is the tea guy, but he's also known for his aerospace company, his tech company, Bigelow Aerospace. And from 1996 to 2016, Robert Bigelow formed a scientific team. It was called NIDS, and it was kind of like a science advisory board, they call it. It stood for the National Institute for Discovery Sciences. Now, Mr. Bigelow, he has quite a big interest into the paranormal, especially now. I mean, he still does things around the same topic, but he bought the ranch then, and it's been sold yet again, I believe, in 2016, to Brandon Fugel, who is a local entrepreneur, and now he has actually opened the ranch up to the History Channel, and they have a very popular series called The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I've caught a couple of the episodes, but I was waiting at first to be able to marathon it, and now we're several seasons in, so I have a lot of things that I need to catch up on. From what I understand, they've actually caught a lot of evidence for that. But tonight, we're just going to go over primarily the things that I found in two of George Knapp and Colin Kellier's books, Hunt for the Skinwalker and The Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. So, all this talk about skinwalkers, what are they? Back in the day, the Utes were a tribe of big bullies, apparently, according to them, and they really liked to bully the Navajo. They were constantly causing trouble. They would enslave the Navajo, and I believe they would trade them to the Spanish for horses and things like that. Of course, the Navajo did not care for this too much, and so the Utes like to say that they put a curse on them, and they call it the curse of the Skinwalker. A Skinwalker is a dark sorcerer or a dark magician that gains their powers through dark ritual practices. The tribes consider them to be evil, so much so that you won't ever really hear them talk about them. They say that they are evil, and that if you are unlucky enough to have captured their attention simply by just saying the word Skinwalker, then you're in for a world of hurt, because they cause nothing but sickness and bad luck and death, disease, destruction. Nothing good. They want nothing good for you, and they're hell-bent on making your life a living hell. So it's best to avoid that word, and they're very serious about it. The Navajo, the Ute, they don't like the word. So in 1994, like I said, the Sherman family bought the ranch, and the really weird occurrences kind of started happening from day one. They were actually in the process of moving in, and one of the reasons they bought the ranch is it was their dream to own a big cattle operation. And it wasn't so much, for beef cows or things like that. Mr. Sherman had actually gone to college, and he was into artificial insemination, and the cattle that he had were called Simmental cattle, and apparently they're worth a lot of money for these cows. So we're talking about big money cows, and it was kind of a breeding operation. When they first got there, they had unloaded the calves and everything into their own little corral, and as they were unloading the trucks, in the distance, they kind of saw this dog that was, making its way towards them. And the closer the dog got, the bigger this dog got. And when it was only, yards away, they could tell that it wasn't a dog, and their alarm bells kind of went off because it was a wolf. It just had the stance of a wolf, the appearance of a wolf. The only thing that was different is the fact that it was gigantic. I mean, it was huge. And the wolf slowly made its way toward them. It just kind of trotted up, they say, and it had just rained. They could smell, wet canine smell. And the dog seemed to be friendly, so they figured that, it had to come from one of the neighboring properties. It just kind of walked over to them, and, they pet the dog, or the wolf. I mean, they pet the wolf, and by all accounts, he was very friendly. One of the calves made the mistake of sticking its head through the corral bars. When it did that, all of the witnesses that were there that day say that this wolf jumped about 15 feet at this poor calf, and it grabbed him by the nose. When Terry Sherman saw this, his immediate reaction is to save the calf, the baby cow. So he grabs an axe handle and he hits the wolf, and it doesn't faze the wolf at all. He hits the wolf again to get him to drop the calf, and the wolf isn't budging. The calf, in the meantime, is bleeding, and it's crying, and it's just horrible. He runs to his truck, and he grabs a handgun, and he fires at this wolf that still has the baby cow, the calf, and he hits it, and it doesn't faze the wolf. He fires again, nothing. So he's hit this wolf repeatedly with an axe handle. He's fired at this thing and hit it with a handgun, and then he tells his father to grab the hunting rifle that's on the back window of the truck. I guess being a rancher, you would kind of keep those things handy just in case for, predators or things like that. And so the father, Terry Sr., goes in, he gets the rifle out of the truck, he hands it to Terry Jr., who immediately takes aim, and you got to keep in mind, it's point blank range. He's right there. He fires, and the wolf drops the calf and just kind of turns and looks at him. He fires again because obviously this is a threat and he can't let it stand. The wolf when he fired that time, a big chunk of flesh came off of the wolf's hindquarters. The wolf simply looks at them, and then at that point in time, he kind of goes away. He wanders off, and he's trotting. He's not running full out, but, you know, he's trotting away the same way he came up to him. And so Mr. Sherman and his son make the decision to go after the wolf because they can't leave him. Number one, they've maimed him, you know. He's hurt and injured, and they don't want to leave him like that. And then number two, because he has proven to be a danger to the farm animals and maybe to people at this point, they can't allow it to roam the ranch. So they are experienced hunters, and they are tracking the wolf. Like I said, it had just rained, and this wolf was huge by all accounts. Its footprints were about an inch, you know, deep into the mud. They follow the wolf for probably about 1.5 miles, if I'm correct, and the tracks go out into the middle of a field, and they disappear. They stop. The tracks stop just in the middle of the field. There's no reason why they should have stopped, because it was muddy ground, you know, but it appears as if this wolf just poofed. It got to a certain point and it vanished, right? So that's a little odd. So Mr. Sherman and his son go back to where they've left his father and his wife, and they look around, and they can still smell the wet canine smell. There are still tracks in the dirt, and he looks to where the chunk of flesh had come from the wolf. He walks over to pick it up, and this flesh that he had just, you know, injured the wolf, it just came off of this thing, this creature, is now worm-ridden and rotted in just that short period of time. So that was kind of weird. They tried to tend to the calf. It didn't make it. And they pretty much just kind of shoved it down. They didn't talk about the experience again because it was so crazy, and they went on with their lives. You know, they moved everything in. This was their dream, and they were going to make it work. You know, they just tried to keep an eye out for really, really big wolves that kind of acted oddly, I guess. From then on, things kept happening. Just little weirdo things. I mean, I would call this poltergeist type phenomenon, and it was where Mrs. Sherman went to the grocery store, and she bought a week's worth of groceries, and, you know, for the ranch family and the workers and everything, it was quite a haul. She brought it home, unloaded everything from the car with help from her son, put everything away into the cabinets in the refrigerator, and she went to shut the door or something. I can't remember what it was, but she was only gone for about 5 minutes. When she came back, all of the groceries were in the bags on the counter. You know, they were back in the bags when she knew that she had put everything away. I mean, her son could vouch for her, right? They put everything away, and all of a sudden, in 5 minutes, it's back on the counter, everything in the bags, like it never happened. Mr. Sherman was actually repairing a fence, and he had like an auger for drilling the holes. It was about 40 pounds, I believe they said, this 40-pound auger, and or maybe 75 pounds. Yeah, it was 75 pounds, I'm sorry. And he stops, and he leans the auger up against a pole, and he wipes the sweat from his forehead, and he takes a couple of drinks from his water bottle. He turns back around to get back to it, and the auger is gone. He didn't move. Nobody came. The auger is just gone. It's disappeared. 3 weeks later, they find this 75-pound auger 40 feet up in a tree. 40 feet up in a tree. You know, it's gone in the blink of an eye, and they find it up a tree. That's just, to me, that's crazy. Other small things happen, like Mrs. Sherman going to take a shower. She would take a towel and a hairbrush in there with her, and she would lock the door behind her. When she got out of the shower, the door would still be locked, but the towel and the hairbrush were gone. So they would see these shadow figures that would walk past their windows at night. The shadow figures would be on the outside, and it was just plain as day. You know, it was a human shadow that would just walk past the windows, and when they would check outside, there was nobody there. There was nothing around. These shadows went from just walking past the windows to standing at the foot of their beds. As time went by, they would also hear voices. It wasn't just the family necessarily, it was anybody that visited the property. And they describe it as sounded like, especially when they were outside, they said it sounded like there were people standing 10 feet above you, and they were talking in a language that they didn't really understand. They said that it sounded like it was maybe Slavic or Russian or something like that. But they had no idea what they were saying. And one time they told the voices, "Hey, we hear you." And they said that the voices kind of stopped for a second, and then they started kind of laughing and mocking the Shermans. So that's a wee bit odd. They would also begin to feel the ground beneath their feet rumbling in the middle of the night, and it sounded almost like a train running underground. Mr. Sherman went out to, there were 3 homesteads on the property. 2 of them were just kind of old and abandoned, and then of course the house that the Shermans occupied. Mr. Sherman went out to what they call Homestead 3 one day, and you know, it was perfectly fine the afternoon before when they did perimeter checks, and when he went out the next morning to do the same checks, he found huge scoops, is what he called them. Scoops of dirt were missing. Hundreds of pounds of earth were just gone. And he said that it looked like somebody just went in with a big spoon in several spots and just scooped the dirt out. The dirt was nowhere to be found, and there was just scoop marks all over the property there, around that particular homestead. They began to see lights in their fields, and it would either look like the lights were coming from inside of the pasture land and shooting upward, just bright, like aurora borealis type lights, or sometimes they look like spotlights that would just shine straight up from nowhere, and they would see this, there would be no source. And at other times it looked like it was just shining down on either one spot or illuminating the whole area, and yet again it was these lights that came from nowhere. They began seeing, now this is 1994, you have to remember, they began seeing these things which today they describe as a stealth bomber looking, or not stealth bomber, stealth fighter looking black triangular craft. It looked like it had Christmas lights all the way around it, and this thing would just slowly be crossing over their land, and it would be shining a spotlight down in certain areas as it went, like it was searching for something. There were also these orbs that would show up. It would be different colored orbs. They saw them that were red. Mr. Sherman says that there were these particular ones that were like an orange color. It looked like the sun, like very small versions of the sun. And he could see them from far away. And when he would look through the scope in his rifle or his binoculars, he said that you could look at the orb and it was almost like whatever was on the other side of it wasn't the same place. He said, you know, it would be daylight here, and when you would look into that orb, it would be nighttime wherever this window was. that George Knapp says that there was another colored orb, and he called them the blue meanies, and they were these brilliant blue balls of light, these orbs, and inside of these there was a liquid that would mix around. And unlike the other orbs that would just zip around, or they didn't really cause that much of a problem other than, I imagine, just to startle you, these blue ones would create a primal fear in the Sherman family. Whenever they were around or they were encountered, the family says that you were just immediately terrified for no reason. And they said that this was just like a terror that you couldn't even explain. And they almost kind of got the feeling that maybe these blue orbs were feeding off of that fear or something. It was just really odd. Another time, the Shermans had gone to town. They were coming back, and this goes on the really weird creature thing. They see the horses in their corral on the way to the house, and the horses are just kind of panicking. They're all over the place, and they can see dust in the middle of the corral, but they can't see what's causing it. When Mr. Sherman went to investigate, he says that he saw this hyena-like creature that had these long whip-like claws and this really big bushy tail that resembled a fox, but this thing was huge. He'd never seen anything like it. And what this thing was doing was taking its claws and swiping at the horse's legs. And it just disappeared once it was confronted, like a lot of these things do. And they tended to the horses, and the horses made a full recovery, thank goodness. There was one particular time when Mr. Sherman was traveling, and so Gwen was left at home on her own. She said that she saw this craft. She said it was humongous. She thought that maybe it was an RV or something, but it was like the size of a really big rectangular trailer thing. And it landed directly in their front yard. She sat down on the table, and she said that a wall slid open in this thing, and she saw this huge being. It was humanoid, but it had a visor thing that covered its face. And she said it was very large. She saw it walk over to something that looked like a desk, and it just kind of sat there staring in the direction of their house. And of course, she starts freaking out, and she immediately calls, Terry, and she's like, you need to get home now. He finally makes it home by the next morning, and when they go out to investigate, they don't see anything, no signs of anything having been there, but they do see these deep 14-inch footprints, human-looking footprints, or boot prints, I should say, that are marking the area. They're all over the ground there, but there was nothing else to show anything had been there. George also says that there were quite a few cattle mutilations, and you have to remember, this is their livelihood. So when something's happening to their cattle, it's not a good thing. They called in people to try to figure it out, and they never could find an explanation. There were no predators that were killing these cattle. They were done in such a way, we'll get to one particular time that this happens here in a second, but it was just really odd, like a lot of cattle mutilations are. George also says that some of these stories they heard were so wild and just kind of crazy sounding that they had to actually leave a lot of things out of the book because they thought that people wouldn't take them seriously. One story that they heard were from two officers that were at that time at the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they were out patrolling, and one of the areas that they went to was the ranch. He said when their headlights hit the gates, they saw these two men standing there smoking. They were wearing old school looking hats and trench coats. One of the officers got out, excuse me, to walk up and talk to what he thought, I guess, were security guards over the property, or at least to ask them who they were. And when they turned around, they weren't humans. They had dog heads. So they were humanoid, dog-headed men in hats and trench coats that were smoking cigarettes. When his partner got out of the car, because these things just disappeared, it's like you blinked and they were gone. When his partner got out of the car to help investigate, they found the cigarette butts littering the ground, but there were no dog-headed men or trench coats or fedoras to be found. So that one's kind of funny to me. Eventually, the Shermans were at the end of their rope. They didn't know what to do. Things were just really bad. Gwen lost her job at the bank because she had been unable to sleep. Their nerves were just raw. Something was killing their cattle. This is their livelihood. Just everything seemed to be going wrong for them. And somehow or another, Robert Bigelow found out about the strange goings-on there. He reached out to the Shermans and he offered to buy the place from them, and they sold it to him for a loss. They sold this beautiful 512-acre ranch to Bigelow. So I think I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and when we come back for part 2 next week, we're going to go into the second book that's going to have a lot more of the scientists' experiences, as well as our government spending our tax money on the paranormal. So I hope that you enjoyed this story. I definitely enjoyed telling it. This is a rabbit hole that you could fall into forever. There are so many things that this connects to. The next time you guys have a couple of hours and you just want to chill and learn something, you can go ahead and look this up. As usual, I will have all of my resources linked in the comment box down below. Please like and subscribe the video. I would subscribe to the channel and like the video. I'm so tired, you guys. I would greatly appreciate it. And until next time, you guys be good, say your prayers, send out good vibes, and always try to stay in the light. I will talk to y'all later. Bye.